So we have an important call that I'm going to put on the mic in just a moment. So in 2022, the Louisiana legislature passed a reapportionment plan. As President Trump said, it was a perfect plan, it was a great plan, there were no problems with it, but it was challenged by the NAACP, asking that a second majority black district be created. The problem, of course, with that is that under Supreme Court rulings, in order to create a minority district, you need a cohesive group or community of citizens who are numerous enough to justify that district. And that's why in the state, in Alabama recently, the Supreme Court ordered a second black district for that reason, because there was a cohesive community. But in Louisiana, there was not. In order to create a district like that, you would have to go all around the world, in this case, from Baton Rouge to Shreveport, to pick up minority precincts to create a district. So the NAACP challenged it, and our Attorney General and our Governor were fighting that, and then after the election, and they were sworn in January of 2024, the Governor and the Attorney General switched sides and said that we were mandated by the courts to create a second majority black district. And they pushed that through the legislature very strongly. And that's how Cleo Fields was elected to be in the Congress. But right after the plan passed in January 2024, a group of Louisiana citizens led by Burt Calais, who is here today. Burt, would you raise your hand? Calais sued the Secretary of State, Nancy Landry, the new Secretary of State, to have the plan that was passed by the legislature invalidated. The reason Nancy Landry was the defendant is by virtue of her office that she holds as Secretary of State. However, the Secretary of State never embraced that plan. In fact, she opposed that plan. After the new plan was passed, though, as I said, the Attorney General and the Governor switched sides, and they defended this new plan creating the second majority district. So you had two cases going on, one filed by the NAACP challenging the 2022 reapportionment, and a second case which was in the Western District of Louisiana, Calais versus Nancy Landry, the Secretary of State. That second case got to the Supreme Court in March of this year, and the justices showed a lot of interest in it, and they had another hearing on it, and they've asked for another hearing, which is tomorrow. And by their comments and demeanor, most people have gotten the idea that they're about to make a historic decision of some type. There's speculation about what it may be. It may be to invalidate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But before the Supreme Court, there are several different arguments. One is the argument by Paul Hurd, the legal counsel, the chief counsel for Mr. Calais and his group. That's the first. And then there is the argument by the NAACP challenging that. Then there is the argument by the Secretary of State, which is supporting the Calais position. And then there is the argument by the Attorney General. And the Attorney General's argument has flipped in the last few weeks from being in favor of the Cleo plan to now, I guess you would say, kind of against the Cleo plan. But here's what she is arguing in her brief before the Supreme Court, and that is that Section 2 of the Voting Rights should be invalidated. And if it is invalidated, that districting plan goes out the window. But she is also saying if the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is not invalidated, then the Cleo Fields district is just fine. So that's a real difference between the position of the Attorney General and the position of Calais and the Secretary of State. And the Supreme Court has all those arguments and briefs before that, and oral arguments will be tomorrow. And the lead counsel for Mr. Calais and his group, which is challenging that, is Paul Hurd. And Paul is a very distinguished attorney from Monroe. He is the one that actually was the lead counsel in the 1990s that had the gerrymandered district in those days invalidated. In fact, it was also Cleo Fields was the congressman, and that district went from Baton Rouge to Shreveport, and Paul Hurd argued before the Supreme Court, and it was invalidated. And the district is basically the same today, and you have before you a map showing this new district which is being challenged tomorrow. So let me see if I can get Paul here on the line. Are you there, Paul?